Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and everything in between. Old man's rambling again. It's chilly now. Put on a sweatshirt. Bit of a departure for today. I'm going to steal someone else's idea. um, I was I occasionally go down odd YouTube rabbit holes, and some while back I went down a literary analysis kick, I guess you'd call it, watching videos about story structure, scene structure, how films are broken down, how scripts are, stuff like that. It was really interesting, and came across this guy. I don't remember who it was anymore. Um, he did a piece called Seven Stories That Changed My Life. And he went out and outlined like stories in movies and television shows and books and video games that he felt changed his life. And he asked his audience, like, tell me, do you have any stories that changed your life? He asked his viewers to comment. And I thought about it. And I've mentioned previously I'm a very passive consumer of media. It's like there's really only been like one story that's changed my life, or and we'll get to that. But that doesn't mean no stories have had an impact or have meant anything to me. And it usually boils down to certain individual scenes in stories that have really stuck with me for one reason or another. So in my departure, I'm going to go through and review like several stories that I know about that have somehow meant something to me. So I've managed to pull something from them that stuck with me. I even wrote a script. I have a script. Well, that's a piece of paper. But I did write down script. I did have notes on a laptop. So if you see me like glancing down over here, it's because I'm trying to, make sure I keep my place. So, Hogfather takes place in Terry Pratchett's Discworld. It's a series of novels that are basically a somewhat of a fantasy pastiche. He kind of pokes fun at fantasy stories. You have like this. He kind of took the normal fantasy structure and twisted it a bit. He'll do these like this law is immutable, but here's how it's broken. Like in the world there are no women who can be wizards, but here's a female wizard. He does these weird fantasy pastiches. The main character for the first few books is just this completely incompetent wizard. Then the story develops about other characters and stuff. One of the characters is Death, the actual embodiment of death. And in the Hogfather is Discworld's version of Santa Claus. And something happens to Santa Claus. He has been eliminated, and Death, to try and keep the magic of Christmas alive, takes Hogfather's place and go around distributing presents. And there are some wonderful scenes in that. I never read the book, but I came across a BBC live action adaptation of the novel. Loved it immensely. Loved the character of Death. There's a scene where he gives a little girl a sword because that's what she wants for Christmas. And her parents are like, you can't give a kid a sword. He's like, of course I can. It's educational. What if she cuts herself? Then that will be an important lesson. But it's the silly stuff like that. I really liked it. But there's a line at the end of the story, and I'm going to have to read because I want to make sure I get it right. Grind the universe down to the finest powder, sieve it through the finest sieve, and show me one molecule of justice, one atom of mercy. And yet you act as though there is some order in the universe, some rightness by which it may be judged. You need to believe in those things so that they can become. That stuck with me. That really was important to me, because it a lot of the morality fluctuates from culture to culture and things like that. But yeah, we act as though goodness and rightness are inherent in the universe, and they're not. They're things we've sort of invented for ourselves, and the only way they exist is because we believe in them. And that whole line that you need to believe in these things so that they can become, that and, grind the universe down and show me, show me these things at the fundamental level of the universe. And at the fundamental level, they're not there. They're only there because we believe in them. And that really hit me. That struck me hard. I really liked that. Transition time. Change pictures. Changing pictures. That's the extent of my editing skill. I'm going to do that a couple times. Anyway, Empire Strikes Back. Everyone knows Star Wars. I don't got to explain that to you. A lot of people say The Empire Strikes Back is the best film in the entire series. Prequels, original trilogy, and sequels and spin-offs combined. I'm not sure I agree with that. If it's the best, it might be. I certainly like it a lot. But we're going to talk about a scene that meant something to me. And that is a scene where Luke Skywalker's X-Wing is sinking into the swamp. And Yoda tells him to use the Force, to pick it back up again, to keep it from sinking. And Luke's response is, all right, I'll try. And Yoda's famous line is, try not. Do or do not. There is no try. And that one simple phrase, I've kind of carried that with me through my whole life since then, because the first time I heard it, it was like, holy crap. That just encapsulates so much in that one short little sentence. Because, when Luke says, I'll try, you can see he's already given up. He's not trying. He expects to fail. He's basically doing it just to humor Yoda, with no expectations that he'll succeed. He's given up before he started. And that's what Yoda means when he says, try not. There is no try. Don't give up before you've taken your first step. Try, do it as though you expect to succeed. Don't just go through the motions. Try not. Do or do not. There is no try. I can't. The pidgin English that Yoda uses is, kind of silly, but I really can't put it any simpler than that. There's no try. Just do it. My editing. I gotta hire an editor. Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. This is one of my favorite childhood films, really, of all time. It still is. I still love this movie. When I was a kid, poor Charlie Bucket, so poor, living next to a chocolate factory. All he wants is to occasionally have a piece of candy and not have his life suck so much. And then he wins a chocolate factory. But when I was a kid, I didn't want to be Charlie Bucket. I wanted to be Willy Wonka, because he was nuts. He was extravagant and goofy and absurd and just did not give a crap. Sorry, I'm editing myself. He had no F's to give. I loved Willy Wonka. I loved his insanity. As an adult looking back on it, it's not quite as nice as I thought it was. There's some problems with Willy Wonka. Him torturing 5 children, and a man who is so obsessed with his own way of doing things, a refusal to change, that he'd rather mold a child into his own image than let someone else take over. But again, end of the film. When Charlie Bucket gives up his everlasting gobstopper, places it on the desk, and Gene Wilder slowly closes his hand over it and says, "So shines a good deed in a weary world." And that's the thing that's the line that stuck with me. It's like, from a couple different perspectives, it shows how just one small act of honor and integrity can mean so much to anyone. Willy Wonka's character has given up. He's been, like I said, he's got some problems, but he's been beaten by the world. He's You can see it, he just, he's tired. People have tried to take advantage of him. People have tried to hurt him. And he's just done with it. He has virtually no hope left at all. No, no faith in the human race left until, Charlie gives up. Charlie gives up his dream. Charlie gives up everything. The financial security of his family, because he won't betray Willy Wonka. He won't betray that trust. He's a simple, honest child who makes mistakes, like everybody does, but he owns up to them and is willing to commit to being a good person. And also, Gene Wilder just conveys so much emotion with that short line. He conveys just how world weary that Willy Wonka is. It's amazing what you can do and deliver with such a powerful performance with a good actor. Side note, for those who don't know, the actor who played Charlie Bucket stopped acting and went on to become a veterinarian. He actually lives in Vermont, I think, not that far from here. Well, a couple hours drive anyway. But I thought it was interesting that the company that I wound up working for, IDEX Laboratories, which specializes in veterinarian supplies, sells to Charlie Bucket. The actor played Charlie Bucket. I thought that was a little interesting around. I have no connection with him, but I thought it was a little aside. Company that I worked for sell stuff to him. Back to the editing board. Next story, please. Muppet movie. No, Muppet movie. The original Muppet movie, the first one. The first one with Jim Henson put out was kind of a risky take for Jim Henson, because no one had made a full-length feature film using Muppets before. TV shows, sure, but everyone expected a flop. But it doesn't matter. I love the Muppets. I have always loved the Muppets. And because I am an old man, I watched the Muppets before there was a Muppet Show. I've seen the Muppets before there was a Sesame Street. Jim Henson Company used to do commercials. I remember the LaChoy Dragon. LaChoy was a, store-bought Chinese food. They made chow mein and chicken and Chinese noodles and stuff like that. They used to have a giant life-size Muppet that would trash the store while advertising LaChoy. Advertising coffee, see him on talk shows and stuff. I've loved the Muppets my whole life. And I love the Muppet movie. It was fun and goofy and silly. It was the Muppet Show. It was an hour and a half long Muppet Show. It was great. Guest stars and everything. But again, the climactic final battle of the film. A lot of these things are end of the story stuff, it seems. There's the final confrontation between Kermit and Doc Hopper. And Doc Hopper explains his dream of owning a chain of fried frog leg restaurants across the country. And Kermit's response is, I have a dream too, but it's all about singing and dancing and making people happy. And couldn't figure out for years why that stuck with me for so long. But it did. It was one of the things that I kept coming back to. I mean, there were other lines in the film that I liked. And I actually never really liked that final confrontation between the two of them. It was probably one of the few parts of the film that felt flat to me. It didn't hit hard for me, except for that one line. I have a dream. It's all about singing and dancing and making people happy. It took me years to realize that the reason that stuck with me was because I believe in the dream, which sounds corny and stupid, but there it is. Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe by C.S. Lewis. There was no list about stories that involves me. It does not involve this book, because this is the first book I ever read. The first novel I ever read. I mean, I've read children's books. I taught myself to read at a very young age, and I've always loved to read. This is the first novel, non-pictorial book, that I read by myself. This is the very first book I ever read. This is the one story that changed my life, because without this, I wouldn't have become a lifelong reader. At least I don't think I would have, or it would have been a different book. But this is the book that got me started in reading. Maybe I'll do a full review of it, but yeah, this is what started my love of books, and I probably will have to do a book review of it. And it took me forever to find this book cover, because this is the book cover I have. They re-release a new book cover every couple of years, but this is the book that I got. Star Trek Voyager. Got Star Wars on this list and Star Trek. This is why I took notes. This is why I got to look at my screen. I haven't really look at my. I've been glancing down here, but not to look at my notes. I haven't really needed them, but this one I need notes for a reason. I was not a huge fan of the Star Trek Voyager series. No particular reason. It just didn't. After Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, I kind of gotten tired of it. I kind of gotten burned out. So I'd stopped watching it on a regular basis when the character of 7 of 9 finally joined it, which is, let's tickle the eye thing here. She was a Borg drone who was freed from the Borg and became a regular on the show. She was kind of there as eye candy. The producer, I can't remember his name now, but he basically put her there as eye candy. She wore a skin-tight suit that was, from the actress's point of view, from what I've heard, extremely uncomfortable to wear, extremely tight, and just, from her character was not always treated well by the producers, and sometimes by the writers as well. But her and the holographic doctor were often used in the same way that Data and Spock were, to explore the human condition, to look at the human condition from outside, from like a non-biased point of view, and to try and look at things from a different point of perspective. And I think they did a good job with that. I want to talk specifically about, finding notes, the episode, season 6, episode 2, titled "Survival Instinct." 7 of 9, in like her past life, had altered another pod of Borg drones with her. They crash landed and got separated from the Borg, and she basically created a miniature collective for just the 4 of them. And now she's free of the Borg. The other 3 drones are also free of the Borg. But their implants are causing them problems. They want to be. They're still linked together in a collective unconscious. They're still stuck inside each other's heads. And to separate them, to completely remove all their implants and separate the link, would basically end their lives. Not immediately. They would live out a month or 2 or 3. They would have, but it would pretty much kill them. And everyone in the show is arguing, we can't do this. We have to keep, it's better to leave them as they are so that they'll at least be alive. And someone asks, even 7 of 9 is saying this, and you can't separate them, we have to keep them alive. And someone asks 7 of 9, if you were in their position, what would you do? And she then goes to the doctor and says, we have to separate them. He's like, no, we can't. We have to keep them alive. And she's like, no, you don't get it. Survival is insufficient. I would not, I would rather live a month free than live the rest of my life as a Borg drone. And she explains to the doctor as well that, like, you're a program, you're a hologram, but you've been allowed to expand your programming. You've been allowed to exist. You've changed beyond your original programming. Would you go back to being what you were? Just a simple medical program. And he agrees with her. Survival is not sufficient. And that little scene right there, that whole scene surrounding that survival isn't sufficient, that hit home to me, because it, again, survival is not sufficient. We need more. We can't just exist and stay alive. We need more than that. We have to keep going. We have to have a reason to be here. It's not enough just to exist. And finally, oh, this is going to go way too long. Oh, I got one more after this. All right. It's too long. I got to keep it shorter. Captain America, the First Avenger. Shorten this up. I'm going on too long. All right. May surprise you, some of you, this is on the list because it's not a great, well, it's a fun film. It's not exceptionally deep, though. Although, surprisingly, it has a deep moment. There's a scene where Dr. Erskine is in the barracks with Steve Rogers, and Steve asks the doctors, "Why did you pick me? Why did you choose me to be captain, to get the super soldier serum?" But before he answers that question, he says something. He says to Steve that most people forget that the first country the Nazis invaded was their own. And that just blew my mind because it's true. We talk about World War II, we talk about the Nazis, and we talk about the horrors of the Holocaust. And they were horrors, but we forget that in order to get there, the Nazis had to turn their own countrymen against each other. The first countries the Nazis invaded was their own. They used propaganda and rhetoric and lies to turn the German people against each other, to maintain and consolidate their own power and to fuel their own biases and bigotry. And you don't usually get something like that from a superhero movie. That was pretty deep for a cheesy superhero movie. A good superhero movie, but a cheesy one. And finally, sorry it's going on so long. Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. I'll try and keep this short to try and end this on a... This may be a controversial pick for some people. If you know why, you know. If you don't know why, I'm not going to explain it to me. That would take too long, and it's already too long as it is. But I was introduced to Harry Potter through my oldest daughter. She was 8 or 9 when the first book came out. Well, not when the first book came out, when she first brought the book home from school. There already been, I think it was the third book had been released, but they hadn't started making movies yet. And I dismissed it. It's like another kid's movie that my wife and my daughter are going to read at bedtime. I didn't care. And the trailers came out. I was like, wow, that looks kind of cool. Took the family to see the film, fell in love with it instantly. I love the Harry Potter series. One of the reasons is because if I had ever written a book, this is the book I would write. My story is not unique. I had a sad, lonely childhood. I identify with Harry Potter. And yeah, I was bullied as a kid. I desperately wanted a place to belong. So, I kind of identify with the story, Unfortunately, the part I identify with isn't being a wizard. It's being, a bullied little kid. So, yeah, the reason I love this story, love this series, is because if I was going to write a book, this is the kind of story I would write. Take from that what you will. That's a long list of stories that had an impact on my life. I guess it was more than I thought. And I've rambled on way too long. I pretty much burned through half my lunch hour doing this. If you watch this long, tell me what you think. If you haven't watched this long, I'm not surprised. Very few people will. But as always, thanks for watching. If you liked watching me ramble on like this, please stop. Stop liking this. I can't promote myself. I'm too self-deprecating. And as always, and until next time, I'm confused. Until next time, good hunting. Sorry that went so long.